Animation Basics in Unreal Engine's Level Sequencer. I'll be explaining how the curve editor is used with the motion path and curve channels to create procedural motion along with the help of a couple of manual keyframes. Now here I have a very simple level set up. All it has is this floor just for your ground level, so you have a reference. It's not even necessary. Now let's start by dropping in a character or an object into your viewport. It doesn't have to be a rigged character. Of course, if it is a rigged character, that would help a lot for the later half of this video when I show you how to combine baked animation with the transform layer on the sequencer. Now, this is a skeleton mesh. This is a character rig that I created in Houdini. It's a custom character. Okay, I'm just gonna get a good angle. Okay, this looks nice. So click on this button over here and it'll put your character right in the origin position. But first I need some keyframes in there and we need to create a sequencer. In Unreal Engine, sequencer is the timeline. So Unreal Engine is a real-time engine. It's built for games, but you can also use it for cinematic animation, for making films, movies, animation, but you need a sequencer. And then there's this clapperboard up here. You click this and you add level sequence. So we already created a level here, and that's this simple little level I have here. So if you're gonna animate something, we need a sequencer. We need a timeline, and that's what a level sequencer is. So we're gonna click this clapperboard here, drop down, add level sequence. Now I'll ask you where you wanna save it. So make a nice folder, keep things organized, and put all your sequences in one folder. And I'm just gonna label it here. I'm just gonna put in my sequencer folder. I'm just gonna call this sequence test. There, and you'll see a timeline will automatically pop up. So this is where you animate everything. This is where all the fun magic happens. Now right now our sequencer is very empty. There's nothing in here. We have to add this character into the sequencer. Now we've already added it to the viewport, which is good, which is the first step you need. Then you can actually click this and add to sequencer, and this will list out all the objects in your viewport that you've added to the level. So this makes it a lot easier to add, and it's a good practice to add your objects to the viewport before adding it to the sequencer. You don't have to. If you can just automatically add it directly into the sequencer, and it'll automatically add it to the level for you. I just think it's a good habit to add it to the viewport and then zero out the position and then add it to the sequencer. This is the character. That's this guy. Now let's start by creating a very simple keyframe. Now let's gonna expand the transform, expand the location. I'm gonna create a keyframe for the Y. Now how do I know where Y is? You can click this guy here, and I'm gonna enable my widget, my transform widget, by pressing W, E, or R, and that just activates the widget. Okay, let's add a location keyframe here first. Okay, let's add one for the X, Y, Z. So now your widget comes up. Now, if your widget fails to come up, it sometimes I find that it's a little glitchy. That even if you press the W, E, R, trying to get it to activate, or if you try and flip it and it just doesn't appear, try saving the sequence. So click this little button here to save it and see if it comes up. Sometimes I find that does the trick. If it doesn't, close the sequencer and reload it again and see if that helps. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to advance this up to like all the way at the end. And I'm going to move this guy over, and it automatically creates a keyframe for me because I have auto keyframe on. Now let's do that one more time. Now let's turn this guy off so we don't have auto keyframe. If I move him forward, it's not going to automatically create a keyframe for me. I'm going to have to do it myself. So I'm going to have to click these little plus buttons here. So it's a nice idea to have this turned on. It's just a lot more convenient. So I'm going to turn this on. Now I have to do it again though. I'm going to drag this forward. Now another way to create a keyframe is to actually manually change this value over here by dragging the parameter over here. When things get a little crowded, when you get a few more layers stacked up in the sequencer, it's actually a little hard. It's not as easy to click on the object in order to activate the widget, the right widget, because you're going to have like a local and a global. So right now we're on the transform layer. This is actually the global, the world axes, and not the local axes. The local axes will have stuff that is relative to the joints. If you have a rigged character, it'll be relevant to the joint axes. But no worries if you don't know what that means. It's okay. Let's just concentrate on this first. So as you noticed, after we create that keyframe, you'll notice that we'll have a line here. I don't think you can select it in the viewport, but it is a motion path. So it will tell you where the character is traveling. And this is incredibly useful. And I'll show you why. Now, I've made this guy move in a straight line. Not very interesting. Let's have this character turn around. So we're going to have him turn from here and turn all the way over here. So he starts off here. Let's go at the end. Where do we want this guy to land? I want him to be over here. So, okay, let's start with the starting position and then put in the keyframe for the ending position. So this is critical. Do that first, and then we can make the turning animation a lot easier using curves. And you don't have to animate every single step in the turning. I want him to end here. So you can see we have a diagonal. Okay, let's see what this looks like. Not exactly what we want. No, not even close. But let's add in the rotation now. So at least it'll look like he's turning. Let's come down here into the sequencer, expand the rotation, make sure that you have keyframes for the starting rotation position. And then go to the end where you want him to end off with. This is the last pose that you want him to end. What do you want him to look like at the end of the animation? Now press E to activate the rotation, or you can just come down here and it would be the yaw. Now double check that you only have one keyframe selected, one type of keyframe. If you have all of them selected like this and you start fidgeting like here, changing the parameters here, it'll change all three all at once. Now that's not what we want right now. That may be what you want in the future, but just a note of that. Just remember that. Select one and rotate like that. If you're changing it in here though, we're not going to do that. We're going to actually change it here. So it's much easier using the widget. And since we have auto keyframe on, it automatically creates a keyframe for us. So let's take a look at what we got. We're getting close, but it's still not doing a nice turn. I want a beveled turn. So what we're going to do now here is click on the curves. Open this graph. Now let's go back to the sequencer first. These two, we're going to focus on when you're manipulating stuff in the curves graph. It's nice to focus on one axis first. We're going to focus on the y-axis, just because y is what pushed this guy to move forward. What I want to do is manipulate the forward coming over, so it curves over. Now, if you don't know which one is which, and you're literally, sometimes you're overwhelmed because it might not be that simple when you have a character that has a lot of different joints and each joint has its own axes. It may be a little difficult to understand which one's which. In that case, just give it a try. Just click one. Right now, I know that this one is the y-axis, but say I didn't know and I clicked on the x-axis. Go to your curves. Now I already have it open, so it's over here. If you want to have both of them side by side, you can just click and drag this out. Okay. So this is my x, and we're just going to see what happens. Okay. Now, the curve editor has these dots. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to drag it. And you can see how, as I'm modifying this curve, it modifies that motion path. This is very handy. This is telling me exactly how this character is turning in the animation. So I'm going to give it a try. Now that's getting a lot better, but it's not what I want. Now you notice when I click this and I'm dragging this anchor point. So these anchor points are very similar to the pen tool in Illustrator, if you ever use that, or any sort of curve tool editor. As I'm dragging the mouse over, you can see that the curve is not really changing. Not different from when I'm dragging here to over here. That's because this anchor point or these anchors are not weighted. Now there's different types of anchor points. I'm not going to get into every single one, but the one I find most useful is this one with weights. And this actually changes the curveness of the curve, how much you want to curve, by making these anchor points longer. And now it'll become obvious when I do it. Let's select both points, and we're going to change the curve to this guy. And now the anchors are a lot longer. So select one point and drag them out and in. So I hope you can see what I mean now. This gives us a lot more control as how much you want to curve, how much bevel you want that, how much curviness you want that path to be. Now keep your eye on the motion path over here, because this is what we're really after, not this curve here. I mean, it helps if you understand the mathematics of this, but sometimes it can be overwhelming because this is traveling the X direction, and you have to understand that the X, Y, Z and how they will relate to each other. And it gets a little mathy. What I like to do is look at the motion path and just eyeball it. That is probably the most accurate way. And a lot of animators do this when they're animating and they have those onion pages. This is very similar. Eyeballing it will give you way better results. It's the direct result that you're going to generate in the animation. Now let's fit this into what I was trying to get after. Now I want this guy to turn over here. So I want the motion path to curve like this. Let me try it. Okay, it's getting close. Now remember to modify both ends. So if you're having trouble getting what you want, modify both ends to see if that helps. Okay, it's starting to get there. Now, I did say that I wanted the Y. The X worked out fine. So let's try the Y. Let me take this and just change it back. Change it back to, I believe it was this. And that's what it was before. Now let's try with the Y axis. And this is the forward motion. Select both anchor points. And I'm going to change it back to the weighted one, the one that I want. Now I'm going to change this, drag this out. Okay, so that gives me that curve right there that I'm after. Okay. Now another reason why I know that the Y axis is the one I want is that click this guy, press W to activate the translate widget, and you can see that the Y is pointing forward. So that's what I need. I want to manipulate how fast he's going forward, and then that will manipulate this motion path, which is what I'm after in the end result. Now the next thing I want to tweak is the rotation. I want him to go forward, and then rotate a little more sharper, a little more smoother. This is not really the feeling that I want. So let's expand the rotation and let's take a look. So we had on the yaw, we had keyframes on the yaw. Let's click the yaw. Again, select our 2 points when you only have 2 points. So I'm going to turn this to weighted again, and this gives me way more control. Select this. Yeah, that's a bit better. Okay, let's play this. So it feels a bit better. Now this, very simple to create a turning motion. Now let's take this up a notch, and I'm gonna load in a baked animation because this is a rigged character. I'm gonna load in a baked animation and show you how it can work with the transform layer, the keyframes that we had just added, this keyframed animation. We can actually combine the two together. And this is very handy, especially if you have those walk cycles. They actually walk in place. So they're not going anywhere. It's like walking on a treadmill. You're not going anywhere. And you want your character to actually go from point A to point B. And that's where the transform layer comes in handy. But the actual baked animation, you load in individually onto the character as a rig. So let's come over here. In the transform layer, let's mute this. Let's ignore it for now. So right now it doesn't do anything. And in order to load in a baked animation, come over here to the animation layer, click this little plus button, and I only have one animation available for this character. So that makes it easy. Now it starts in the middle of nowhere. So I'm gonna click and drag this to the beginning of the timeline, and let's see what it's doing. It's not doing much. It's just going left and right. Now I want this to repeat. So all I have to do is take this and drag this clip, this baked animation clip, and drag it all the way to the end of the timeline. And you can see, hopefully you can see here. So you can see here there's a small, very light line that's separating the clip. And there's another line here. And that's when the clip will loop. That's when it loops here. So it goes on and on and on and on forever. As long as wherever the clip ends. So this is really helpful. Because now I can have an endless looping, zigzagging animation. But he's not going anywhere. Re-enable that transform layer where he's going in turning. So let's enable that. And let's go to the beginning and let's see how this all works out. So he's turning while he's zigzagging. This is very powerful for like if you have looping animations that are in place animation, meaning like that treadmill walking in place. It's not going anywhere and you have to modify it so that it's actually doing something in the world, in your scene. The baked animation works really, really nice. But say I wanted more control over the animation. Like I wanted to control the zigzag so that he zigzags faster. So he goes left to right faster. Now I don't have much control because this is a baked animation. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to remove the baked animation and actually create the zigzag or the left-right motion right in the sequencer. I'm going to remove the baked animation. Now, I lost my animation layer. How do I get that back? Come over here, click your character layer, press the plus button down here, and we're going to come to the control rig because I need the skeleton rig. Now, come down here, control rig classes. Now, you can create a FK control. This comes with every single skeletal mesh. So let's click just a control rig. Every character should have this. Every skeletal mesh should have this. So we're not going to be needing this tab over here. So I'm going to click and drag it onto the bottom. So I have more real estate. Oh, well, I want to put it, okay, together. So so I have more real estate over the monitor. Now it creates this FK control rig. Now there are a lot of bones. Just because this guy has a lot of bones in the tail and the fins, but the only one that I really need is the root bone. So you can just search root, and that's super handy. So I don't have to keep scrolling all the way down. But first, before we do that, I'm going to mute the transform so that's this turning motion. I'm going to mute it. So I'm going to click this button here. So now it's not doing anything. And we're going to focus on the left-right motion. Come here and I'm going to type in root again. Take the root, expand this. Actually, I think I only need the X. Now, after you click this is what I meant by it's a lot easier if you do the transform layer animation first and then do the local animations, the control rig, like the bone animations afterward. Because it's a lot easier to click on this. It goes to a bone. It's not clicking the actual transform layer anymore. So it's a little harder to rig the transform layer now that we've added the FK control rig, because there's so many bones in the way. You can still click it. It's still clickable. It's still there. It's just a little harder to get through all the noise. Now let's take out the root. Now this is muted out. So let's unmute it. I'm just going to show you how you can click on it. Now, okay, see, if I click this, it goes to the bone. Oh, this actually works. So this actually clicked it. But sometimes I lost it, it's clicking on the root. It's not as easy as it was before when we only had the transform layer. So now I'm having difficulty clicking it again. You can just click this layer. It's not coming up. Click the top control character layer and then it'll come up. And then you can modify this transform layer. Now I can show you. Now you can see this got updated. Now we don't want that, so let's undo that. I just wanted to show you how you can still click on it if you can't get to it in the viewport, just because there's so many bones in the way. You can still get to it. It's just not as easy, so it's good practice to do the transform layer first if you can. So what we're going to do is to the left-right swiveling. So let's go over here. Okay, so it's negative 2.7. I'm going to change this to negative 3. I'm going to put a keyframe. I'm going to click this. Now, the auto keyframe only works when you at least have one keyframe set. So the first keyframe has to be set manually. Now, I'm going to advance this all the way to 330. Oh, I forgot to mute the transform layer. So let's go back. So I don't want that to get in the way. So let's mute it. Go back here. Search for root. Okay, so we have the first position and then go to 30, around 30. It doesn't have to be exact. We can fix this a little later. And I'll show you how to use curves to adjust the speed of the left and right, the swiveling motion. Now we have -3, we want 3 now. So it's going back and forth, left and right. Now advance it another 30 around here and -3 again. So what this does is just goes -3, +3, -3. And now we can loop it. If you advance it, it doesn't loop. Right click this bar over here, this clip. Now it has to be over here in the timeline, not over here. Over here, you can see the menus are different. Now go to curve channels, post infinity. That's afterwards, after the last keyframe. What do you want to do? Cycle. It'll just infinitely cycle through it. So let's play this. You can see that we don't have keyframes here, but it's still going left and right. So that's very handy. Now let's go back up and let's re-enable that transform layer. Remove the root filter, collapse that, collapse the transform, and then I'm going to enable that back. Now we have both working. Now the whole purpose of recreating that left and right motion was that so I could have more control over the left right. I want him to go swivel left and right more often, more frequently. So what we can do, open up the curve editor. I want this guy, and you can see all these bones. These are all the tail and fin bones. We only need the root. Now it so happens that it's the first one up here, but if you can't find your root, there's another filter here to help you out. So you can use that as well. Now I forgot which keyframe I had set. So let's put root here as well, so I can see the keyframe. So we put a keyframe on the x-axis. You can actually click on here as well, and it'll align the selection in the curve editor. Now let's see. So I want him to go back and forth more frequently. Okay, so let's zoom out and see what we have. So it's infinitely looping like this. Now our 2 keyframes our 3 keyframes are over here. Now we're not going to use the anchor points this time. We're going to use this guy that will resize the spacing between each keyframes. Click this and just move this closer. You can see that it's pivoting through this little star. That's not what I want, because then I had to move everything to the left because we have all this space over here that's not doing anything like this at the beginning. So let's undo that. Now move this pivot to the front, so that when we're resizing this, it's just the same thing as resizing an image. It will pivot over there. So we can take this and we can actually move it. And you can see that he's going left and right more frequently. So let's play it. This is incredibly handy. Now it looks a little weird right now just because there's no dynamics set. So we're going to take this up a notch. This might be a little more advanced, this last part, but I want to show you the potential of using this simple type of animation editing combined with a bit of dynamics in Unreal Engine. It will yield very nice results. Now we don't need that. I'm going to take out the root. We actually don't need the FK control. We'll have to recreate it, because what I'm going to do is bring in the control rig. The control rig has dynamics set. It has a spring interpolate, which allows it to have physical dynamics in it, and it looks really, really nice. So I'm just going to delete this control rig, the FK control. Now I'm not going to show you how to create your control rig in this video. I just want to show you the potential of using this. Creating a control rig will be a later topic. Now I've already created the control rig. So control rig, you can choose it here, and mine is called awkwardly named just because I was testing this out. I had so many versions. So let's mute the transform layer first, and let's see what this guy can do. Now it has this control and it still has that same thing, but watch what happens. And that's really fun to play around with. So I hope you know what I'm trying to get at now. So let's create that same left and right swivel cycling. Let's come here. Go like negative. Actually, we can use this widget. Let's go here. -66. Okay. Then I'm going to put a keyframe, because the first keyframe, it has to be done manually in order for this auto keyframe to kick in. I'll go to 30 and then go +60, frame 60, and I'm going to go -60. And let's play it. Oops. Now we need to enable the cycling so it can cycle infinitely. Again, right click this part of the clip, not this, because the menus are different. Curve, post, cycle. So we get infinitely going left and right. Okay, now let's enable that transform layer. Let's combine it all together. Now that looks amazing. Once you, simple dynamics plus a little bit curve editing goes a long way. Now, of course, we can increase the frequency of the left and right motion. So let's do that too. Let's disable the transform layer first. Come here and the location X. So this is the keyframes that I want to edit in the curve editor. Click the curve editor, comes up, zoom out by scrolling, select all the keyframes. And again, we have that same pivot box because I already had it selected. It's going to start off the same thing. And it even kept the pivot in the same position. So I can easily just drag this over. And that should increase the amount of times or how fast it goes left and right. Now let's re-enable that transform layer to have it all work together. Okay, let's do this from the beginning. There you go. And say you don't like that it's going left and right too much, like that -66 that we had inputted in, it was too much. You can actually make this go smaller so it doesn't swivel as hard, as far. So you can adjust it to whatever you want. This curve editor is very powerful. Thanks for watching and sticking to the end.